what I think is very, very interesting about this, because I didn't know that piece of it. Um, okay, so Farside, when you guys, so Rigged is out. We're gonna fast forward and then go back. Rigged is
Yeah.
out. You guys go and do the East Coast. I went on that tour with you guys. We're in the East Coast in the winter, which apparently you're probably not supposed to do.
Yeah, especially from California.
And we drove out there in that van with the tire that had the leak in it. And there was a point, and you were with us, as I remember, where we were driving home through Iowa. So this is your record selling out the door. You guys, aside from the fact that Popeye miscounted the money and then absconded with too much of the money, so we were on limited funds coming home. We're driving through Iowa, and the heater broke.
Yeah.
And so we were literally freezing and driving. And I don't know if you remember, but we pulled off into, like, I believe it was a Denny's. It was some kind of breakfast place. The place was packed. We were in there at like 3 a.m. And that's when we sort of had the conversation of, what do we do? Do we stay here and just get bailed out? Or do we power through, because we were going to rob Hayworth's, because he was going to kind of put us up for a little bit, get us kind of a meal, and then we were going to continue. And I just think that it's interesting because in that the situations are kind of similar, except the landscape for Farside has changed in the sense of you have a record that is selling amazingly, and you've just done a very successful tour of the East Coast, but yet you were almost in, for at least that night, like it was scary. Like I remember waking up with a blanket on my face that felt like it had water on it. I looked over, and Bob looks at me and he goes, "Mushnik," and he's shaking as he's holding the steering. He's all, "Mushnik, are you cold?" And I said, "Yes." "Are you cold?" He's all, "Fuck yes, I'm cold." And then don't you remember that there was a leak where the brake was?
Well, the way I remember it was that I do remember that, but I also remember that like you can put the AC or the heater or whatever on recirculate. I remember that being broken so that the vent, for the outside vent, was always on.
Right.
And when we pulled into that Denny's or whatever, it was one of those places that you see in Middle America with a giant sign that at the top it's got the temperature, and it was 2 degrees. And I remember thinking, like, they're missing a digit. It can't be 2. So, and I remember Ethan was wearing, I believe at that point he had put on every piece of clothing that he had brought. And he looked like the Michelin Man. He was so like big. It was so cold.
Yes. And I honestly remember sitting around that table like there really was like a sense, like, and it wasn't unwarranted. There was like a sense of dread among us. Like we could have froze to death.
Yeah.
In that situation. I guess the roundabout way of saying is, like, do you think it's all interesting that you were sort of like it, even at the height of when Farside was starting to experience like, hey, this record's selling really, really well, there was still stuff like that to contend with?
Oh, I mean, we never made money. I think the only time we ever came home with like a decent amount of money was the very last tour that we did.
That was with Saves the Day
and Fast Break and Kid Dynamite. And I think I came home with $800, which I think by, like, touring band standards is not that much. But I just thought, wow, this is crazy. We never made money.
Was that in any way, when you came home from that tour and you had at least a little money in your pocket, was that in any way like a way of like were you thinking, okay, we're gonna do more of this?
No, because that last tour, the only reason we made money was that Jamie, the singer for Hatebreed, booked it, and so he had a lot of clout, and he was he was a professional, right? Um, and so he got us good guarantees. Um, but the thing with the tour was nobody wanted to see us. You know, Saves the Day was relatively new, but people were really into them, and they were 10 years our junior.
Were you guys headlining that tour?
Yeah, and we kept saying to these guys, like, clearly the crowd is here to see you guys. It'd be nice if we could play before you, because then people would hear us. Maybe we'll sell them merchandise and be able to eat. And I remember they were just like, oh my God, no, you're Farside. You have to headline.
What's that? What's that like? Like, to sort of like to be a band that inspires bands like that, and then you see those bands being more popular than what you guys were at that time. Like, because to me, I was a Farside guy. So any other band that you guys played with, you guys were the band. Unless it was like Game Face, then it was like equal kind of thing. What was that like? I mean, especially then, because it wasn't, you guys were what, just starting to tip into the 30s? Like, you weren't old. No, you guys wouldn't have even been 30s. You guys would have been like mid 20s.
I was 29. Yeah. Because I think that was 2000. So I would have been 29. And the thing with that tour was, it wasn't a good idea. Chu was the only one who I think made the right decision, which was there's no point to us going on tour and having to, put our lives aside and go find a new job or whatever, because we're not going to make any money. And, this is never going to be our job. And I think Bob realized it. But Popeye and I were both, maybe not Popeye as much as me. I was in a very bad place mentally. I was in the middle of getting divorced. I didn't have a place to live for 3 months.
You, me, and Loman almost lived together for literally like a few hours. Like there was talk about it.
Yeah. So I really wanted this to work because it was like being a band guy was my only identity. It was the only thing I knew how to do. And so for me, it had to work. But Bob and Chu especially knew that it wasn't going to work. So once we got out there and we could see that people were interested in these guys and not so much in us anymore, even though we had just released what I thought was a really good record, that was kind of the nail in the coffin for me. It was like, we're done. And I'm done. This is it.
I remember you told me that when you were singing for Adult Crash at Coos, and you and I were hanging out on side after you guys had played, and we were talking about, Evan, I think it's over. And I was like, no, come on, no, we can do this, we can do that, this and that. No, I just think it's over. And shortly after that, I mean, you guys, I think before the whole Saves the Day Fast Break thing, you guys played that show with Smash Mouth. Which I did find, actually. And no, it's interesting because I was going to ask you about the Monroe Doctrine, but I my next movie, once I'm almost done with Death Toll at 4, I'm going to take about a week or maybe 10 days, just kind of relax, and then that Farside thing, and I may cut this out of this interview, but I started thinking about it, and I have some plans for that. Just I'm going to make it free. It's going to be available on YouTube, but I'm going to push that as much as I can. I actually have some interesting ideas because that you guys are in the studio the entire time, and that's before there were such a cottage industry of studio stuff and home recording and stuff like that. And I just think people are going to really find this interesting. I mean, because I don't know that any other recordings, aside from the actual recordings themselves, I don't know that any of that exists other than what's on these tapes. So
Yeah.
hopefully.
I would be really, I really want to see it, just because I think you're right. I mean, I think about like how bands do things these days, and I mean, it's like it would be like learning a new language.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I mean, everybody records at home on their own stuff. I don't even know what record labels do anymore. I mean, I don't know how I would book a tour without the internet these days. I don't even know how we did it. Um, I mean, it was work, and it just seems. I'm sure it isn't, but you know, this is what every old man says. It just seems like these guys have it really easy, but it's a totally different world.
Well, it's interesting because back when you guys were doing this, you guys weren't doing it for money, but there was never an idea that you guys would just record your music onto vinyl or CD and just go out and give it to people at shows. Like, oh, you were always going to sell it because that's what happened. And now it seems like, and again, like you said, this sounds just like two old guys talking. It seems like now the expectation is you're going to record your stuff and you're going to make it available for free. There's going to be the people that are going to want to have it on vinyl or in some physical form. But the deal is that you're going to do that. And that's why I think like so many bands tour and do all that stuff, because I mean, it seems like that's where the money for them, like that's where they're able to hopefully survive, is because they can play live and do all that.
Touring and merchandise seems to be the only way you can make money now. I mean, I get statements from Revelation on a quarterly basis, I think. You know, at some point along the way, we did actually start making money off of the recordings. It's not much, you know. I think maybe I get $200 a quarter, which is, you know, hey, $200. It's great. But it's not, you know, we're not Madonna, whoever's popular these days. I don't know. But I don't think any of it is from streaming, because I don't think we ever hit the threshold or whatever to actually generate enough money that it's, you know, worth paying out, because it's like fractions of pennies per stream or whatever.
It seems like when you're young and you're in it the way that you guys were in it, to where you weren't thinking about it. And there's actually another point I wanted to ask you about too, but it seems like you know, you do it the way that it's done. So you did it the way that it was done then. You're now removed from it. You look at how it's done now, and you're just like, in some ways it seems so much easier, but wow, in some ways it seems like, how do you even do it?
Right. Yeah. I have no idea how these bands make money. I don't get it. But I do understand now, like, you know, it seems like there's more festivals than there are like shows or concerts. And I assume it's because that's where the money is. And if you're a touring band and you're not making money off your recordings, why would you not play festival after festival? You've got to pay your bills. You've got to put food in your mouth.
Going back to what you said about like how what your identity was playing in the band, this has to work. It's interesting because in some situations, the this has to work mentality, it works. But then it seems like in a lot of situations, the this has to work mentality, it completely works against you. And it's almost like the more you want it, the less of a chance you're going to have to get it. Do you think that you were more in that category of you wanted it to work so bad that just at the time, considering everything that you were going through, everything that you were dealing with, where your life was, that there was maybe no way that it could work the way that you wanted it to work?
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, I think there was no way that it was gonna work. It was just out of our control. It's just things change, things progress, time moves forward, and I was fighting against time, really. Um, we had our chances to, you know, we had plenty of opportunities to, push ourselves and record more and tour more, and we just never did it. And that eventually kind of worked against us to where, for me at least, when I got to the point where I was like, well, this is what I want to do. I want to tour nonstop and be on the road and make money. Just wasn't going to happen.
Gotcha.
But that's it's not. It turns out that's not a bad thing. I mean, I had some rough years, but you know, turned out I'm capable of being a lot more than just band guy, and that's good. Like that's really good.
I never looked at it that way. Like, because you know how I always bug you, Kevin, why aren't you playing music? Kevin, it's a crime that you're not playing music. Kevin, you need to be playing your music. I remember, like, you and I used to email, and you'd write me back, my guitar's under my bed, and there's strings missing from it. I haven't touched it in months. But it's interesting because it's actually, I don't want to say good, just because I think it would have been good. I think either way, what happened is good, but I think the fact that you realize, like what you just said, you're way more than the guitarist of any band, and the fact that you now know that is, I think a very special thing.
It's really weird, I think, to other people, but not so much to me, that I don't talk about. Like the people I work with, no idea that I was ever in a band, and I actually try and hide it. When I was living overseas, I was the manager of a group of people, it was like 30 people, and they were from 30 different countries. It was so cool. But at some point, somebody figured out, oh, Kevin was in a band, and they found the video, I think, for audience, and it was just like they were stunned. And but I remember being very embarrassed, and like I didn't, they asked me questions. I was like, I don't really want to talk about this. And I've come to realize that I look back at, and this is very dramatic, but I look back at like the 90s, almost as if I had been in kind of a cult, or like a very strict dogmatic religion, where there's saviors and icons, and there's rules, and there's commandments, and there's dogma that you follow, and there's uniforms, and all of this stuff that all sort of makes up the scene. And for the longest time, I had no idea that the outside world existed. The outside world to me was like the normal people. They're bad. And so, I was sheltered within this group of weirdos that formed this scene. And eventually, I left it / kind of got forced out, and the outside world wasn't so bad.
What's interesting about all that is, to the outside person being your friend, there was all that, and you were involved. You were amidst all that, but you were always pushing up against those cathedrals. You were always pushing up against those cathedrals. Like I remember, even just in a small way, like when you were in Triggerman, and you played with Civ, and you came on stage to play drums wearing an SSD shirt, because in my mind, well, the logo of SSD, it was similar to the Civ logo.
Yeah.
And then,
which I'm sure was intentional.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I never thought about it at the time, but it is interesting to hear you say that even as you're pushing back, you were aware that you were sort of following the cathedrals of, you don't want to sell out. We don't want to play music for the people that picked on us. We don't want our audience to become the audience that we made the music that we were trying to get away from. But my thing is is I think it's hard to explain. Like, even though, you say, hey, the real world isn't so bad. I'm with you. I'm with you. But I think that once you've been in this scene, you will always have a strain of kind of looking at things, certain cathedrals on all sides with kind of a, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's real or, I don't know what the...
I think it is, but what I've come to learn is that so like coming from like the punk rock scene, I learned to distrust authority. I personally became very down on religion. I became very left wing, fairly politically active, but all of which I used to associate with like punk. That was like crass and conflict and icons of filth and all that sort of stuff. And now I know that, I have friends that feel the exact same way that have never heard of any of this world that I come from. It's just completely alien. They like Miley Cyrus. And Miley's great. She's catchy or whatever. But, I'm also, a democratic socialist.
Were you always, even before punk, were you always fairly left?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
and I don't know why.